Runners in the recent Istanbul Marathon found more success wearing the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro, but there was another shoe that everybody thought was going to be right on top of those podiums throughout 2020, but it's mysteriously missing every time. On today's video, we're talking about the future of the Nike Air Zoom Alphafly Next percent. So I think that recent Istanbul Marathon surprised quite a few people, not only maybe with its results, but also the fact that it ran at all, though this time it did see a reduced field on the 26.2 miles, down to about 4,000 athletes rather than the typical 37,000 that it will normally see. COVID measures were obviously in place, with the organisers stopping any supporters from coming and watching the event. There's a large bridge there that crosses the Bosphorus. I mean, it just looks incredible. Can you imagine running across that? It looks quite a breathtaking experience, and one that I'd really love to take in at some stage in the future. I think the runners actually got to cross that bridge twice this time round, as the course was modified slightly due to the worldwide pandemic. Some interesting results here, with some real variation across the footwear used by the runners on the podium. In the women's race, all three of the top athletes utilised the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro. Positions 1, 2 and 3 on the podium. Winning time there of 2 hours, 22 minutes and 6 seconds. Quite a lot of races recently dominated by Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes, and this was no exception. For the men's race, we did see Bernard Cheriou rocking the Vaporfly Next percent. He took the top position on the day. Interesting to see though, the chap in second place was using the Vaporfly 4% Flyknit. That's a shoe we haven't seen in a little while, certainly in those top races. I think the chap's name is Felix Kimute. I could be pronouncing that incorrectly. If I am, I'm very sorry, but exceptional athletes and performances nonetheless. That Adidas shoe though did make it into third position in the men's race. Is this all down to Adidas and Nike signing up all the best athletes? Are they aiming to sign up all of the better, more able athletes and get them running in their shoes? Is it simply down to great combinations of athletes who are exceptionally well trained and the shoes together? Let's not forget that the fastest marathon time yet was in perfect conditions with pacers on a very straight course in the Alphafly Next percent. Could Kipchoge have produced the same performance wearing the Vaporfly Next percent? But we've yet to see that superb performance at the Ineos Challenge repeated in a competitive race. I think we do have to consider over the last few months, it's certainly not been typical training and racing conditions. The lockdown and the global issues experienced by many are undoubtedly affecting the athletes. They're probably making their preparations that little bit more difficult. They're probably experiencing different things in training, perhaps not running with other athletes, running in groups as many of those athletes do on a regular basis. Perhaps it means that they haven't been able to become accustomed to a shoe like this. I've been very lucky. I've managed to pick this up way back in March of this year. Some athletes have had hold of this shoe for a similar amount of time, and perhaps they've managed to become accustomed to it a little bit more. Obviously it was only a small select number of people that got hold of this shoe back in February at the US Marathon Trials, and quite a few people decided not to hang on to it and tried to move it on the resale market. Is it down to the shoe's increased bulk and slightly heavier weight? Is that hindering some runners perhaps? Maybe they're not used to the slightly different heel to toe drop in the Alphafly. I think availability actually might be a key thing here. And I think although some people are quite flexible and have the ability to customize themselves to new gear and equipment quite quickly, it does take time, and you also need the opportunity to do that. Perhaps those opportunities have been few and far between for some of those athletes. I can imagine quite a few of them have had the shoe for a while, but people still seem to opt for the Next percent. Back in May, I managed a 1 hour 33 half marathon attempt in these. I wasn't really pushing things to destruction. I was certainly putting in some effort, but I wasn't pushing myself to the max. Perhaps my early experiences with the shoe have helped me to customize to it and understand how to get the best out of it. I've managed to get my head around its various facets and attributes. I think perhaps that's made me feel more at home in the shoe, and also its supposed training partner, the Tempo Next percent. Many people who finally got their hands on both of those shoes found that they didn't really like them that much, or at least they didn't like them initially. Perhaps at first they lacked the experience in them, and that led them to think that they didn't like it. It was different. It didn't feel the same as the Next percent, where I knew right from March that it was going to be a quite different experience. I'd even suggest that perhaps if you're landing more in the heel in this shoe, you're just not really going to get an awful lot out of the extra bulk. I mean, that's why this is here. The Adizero Adios Pro is obviously closer in weight to the Alphafly, but it does seem that people are really working well with this shoe. Certainly women as well. In the women's race, we're seeing these cropping up all the time. It's a shoe that people were very skeptical about to start with, even myself, but I've certainly been won over in it. What do you make of this one right now? Have you gone for this, in fact, over the now available Alphafly? Let me know in the comments below. Not sure we'll see too many other road races this year now. I think the Istanbul Marathon was lucky in the fact that certain sections of it were actually quite wide, and thus people could distance themselves a little bit more. Be interesting to see if the Adizero Adios Pro keeps cropping up in those podium places. A musical recommendation for you today. I remember when my daughter was born, and around about that time, a great band appeared on the scene called the Vaccines. Really need that to appear on the scene right now. Their great debut album, What Did You Expect from the Vaccines, was on my MP3 player for a long time. It kicks off with the fantastic Wrecking Bar, which is a very short track but fueled full of energy. And the second track on there, If You Wanna, is a tremendous tune. I can remember walking around with my daughter in a pushchair listening to that. I'd walk for miles and miles. Blow It Up's another fantastic track, and Norgard as well. I seem to remember listening to All in White many times as well. I think the Vaccines have gone through a few lineup changes recently. I don't think they ever really nailed it again like they did on this first album. Can't believe it's like 10 years ago that came out. I do remember going to Cardiff University with a couple of my buddies to see the Vaccines playing. It was a great night. The Student Union Bar. It had been the first time I'd gone into a uni bar for many years. It was so cheap as well. Mind you, that was 10 or so years ago. Now a nice cool beverage is almost the same price as a pair of running shoes. Do go and check that one out. What do you expect from the Vaccines? By the Vaccines. Thanks for sticking with me to the very end of the video, guys. I very much appreciate it. If you haven't checked out the channel merch yet, do go and access it via the link in the description. Hopefully it should appear on the channel store soon, but it seems to be taking a while. If you haven't done so already, please click that subscribe button and the bell below for notifications of when new videos are launched. It also helps the channel out a huge amount if you give this video a thumbs up like and share it with your running buddies. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you